Hello, everyone, and welcome to Telling Tales. Here we tell atmospheric stories together through the medium of tabletop role-playing games. You've caught us on a Monday night, which means we'll be playing Call of Cthulhu 7th edition. This is the third arc that I've been the keeper for. It's kind of an anthology series. This series is called Baile. The previous two, Darkwood and Fingask, are available in our Twitch VODs or on our YouTube. So you can go back and watch those if you enjoy this. We have a guest stream manager for at least part of tonight, Matt, who was our stream manager in the first series. Hi, Matt. I've missed that gormless face as you appear on screen.
Good. I am glad. Well, Jonny, let me say this. The previous series of Call of Cthulhu are not available on Twitch as VODs because we're not Twitch partners. Who's the gormless one now?
It's me, but they are on YouTube.
They are on YouTube, yeah.
Yes, that was my mistake. Yes. Our usual stream manager, John, will appear at some point throughout this evening. So any sort of later screen appearances, it's a roll of the dice as to whether it's Matt or John that will appear.
It is. I might just appear at random moments anyway, just to, mouth forbidden things at the camera and stuff like that.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Sorry.
Below the video, there are links to our YouTube if you're watching this on Twitch, or Twitch if you're watching on YouTube, our social media, Twitter and Instagram, our Discord, which you can join and come and chat to us about stuff, our Patreon as well, which if you enjoy the channel, you can use to support us for different monthly amounts, getting you different rewards, all the way from having access to secret bits of the Discord where we discuss Eldritch Tomes and their contents and how to cast the spells within them, all the way up to Matt, who you've just seen on screen, running a game for you and your friends once a month. Which would be very exciting. Probably, maybe, well, I don't know, depends who you ask as to whether it's more or less exciting than Eldritch Tomes. Anyway, other things that we have on the channel, as I've said, Monday night is Call of Cthulhu, Tuesday night is Blades in the Dark, Wednesday night is Simba Room, although this week we're taking a week off that because on Wednesday we're taking part in the A Day Off Twitch strike, which you can read about. I think it's hashtag A Day Off Twitch, and it's to support Black and Indigenous people of colour not basically being protected on Twitch, I believe. Other things that we have on the channel, the first Saturday of every month, we run a different one-shot with different players, GMs and systems. So we've done so far Alien, Troika, Morkborg, Fiasco, The Expanse, Honey Heist, and The One Ring. And the next one is this coming Saturday, September the 5th, and it's Dungeon World, I believe, which Pierre, for those of you who've watched Vampire or Blades in the Dark will know Pierre is going to be running that. So that'll be really nice.
I told you I'd be back. Just to say, it's September 11th, not September the 5th. This one's back.
Oh, sorry. My mistake. No. I don't know where I got that from. But yes, September the 11th, my mistake. Cool. On with the show. So up to this point, the group have appeared on the island of Iona, having been summoned by Mary Brown, who is now an MP, and the Reverend John Moore. So weird things have happened. And as you would expect, I imagine. So let's bring on Matt, who plays Dane, to go through what happened at the beginning of the last session. Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Yeah, do you want to run us through a little bit about the visit to the first farm of the session?
Farm number 1, yes. So this was Sally McRae's farm, and we left the last episode with the group arriving to the kind of barn outside the farm and hearing this really loud buzzing sound, and Eliza drawing her weapon. So Dane kind of decided to go in and investigate, and he found a woman there with a dead cow that was kind of in a really advanced state of decomposition. The woman was kind of stood over it looking really confused. They couldn't chat. They couldn't kind of talk over the noise of the insects. It was so loud. So they kind of stepped outside the barn, and then the woman invited the group into the farm for a kind of cup of tea and to discuss what was going on. So we kind of talked about this cow first, and she mentioned that it kind of appeared out in her barn, and she's really confident that the cow that she found had been fine yesterday, which was particularly strange for the group, given that it seemed to be really kind of like it'd been there for days and days and days. She said that this has happened before. Now it's not the first time, and so she's trying to unpick this, trying to understand what is going on. She obviously thinks that there might be foul play. She mentioned that another resident, Jimmy Doherty, has cows, and she wasn't sure how he was getting on. But yeah, obviously the group had arrived to talk about the death rather than about this cow. So then Eliza kind of neatly pivoted the conversation to discuss that, and just, I guess, pulled together some information from this woman who was hosting the girl who died, kind of some pertinent information to the investigation. So she said that when she was staying with her, she was wandering around in a daze. She mentioned that she'd been in trances for up to a week, and that if something like that happened, she wasn't to worry. She was ultimately trying to contact some kind of spiritual realm of the island. She then mentioned that on a Sunday prior to her death, she looked really worried and frightened. She said that someone was attacking her mind kind of from afar, and that she'd also seen a rudderless boat flying across the sky at one point while she was receiving these sort of terrifying messages in her head. She'd actually packed up, ready to go, and then kind of then appeared back later looking kind of resigned, and decided to stay. And then obviously on the Monday morning, she was then gone. Eliza asked whether she knew whether any of her clothes were missing or anything, because obviously she was found naked when she was dead. And the woman said she wasn't sure. The police had taken it. The police had been round, police had had a chat, but the investigation had seemed kind of lackluster from her perspective. They'd not really asked many questions. They seemed to have kind of written her off as being just an outsider that was a bit strange and kind of met with some unfortunate circumstances, which I think for the group definitely felt concerning given the circumstances of where the body was found, the fact that they would write that off so quickly. So that was definitely noted. We then were invited to have a lovely beef sandwich, which everyone sort of managed to get through despite having just seen this decomposed cow. And then at that point, Eliza was kind of looking around the room to see if there might be any belongings that had been left, and noticed a pair of small kind of hoop earrings that had presumably been kind of silver or something, but had gone black. And she, she assumes that Sally had just not noticed those and had left them rather than was hiding them. And Eliza kind of pocketed those to look at for the investigation going forwards. After that, they kind of just had some discussion with Sally about how long she'd been there, whether she had any worries about the situation and what she thought was happening. She expressed concerns about the difference of kind of spiritual approach and religious approach that she had, but she sees herself as a realist, and she thinks that probably just something unfortunate has happened, but that she maybe brought it with her and perhaps left whatever those troubles were here on the island, kind of suggesting that she didn't think this was over. And then at that point, we really, the group kind of thanked her, offered to help her with the cow and the situation, but she was quite happy to carry on herself, but offered to maybe put a word in to get the vet over from the mainland to maybe come and investigate what was happening. So they're kind of taking this on board as a little side quest to figure out what is going on with these cows. And then decided to head back into the village to catch everyone up on the investigation and take it from there.
Cool, thanks. Inga, who plays Eliza. Hey, Inga, do you want to take us from there over to the second farm of last time?
So we stopped by with Mary and the Reverend and kind of give them a bit of an update on the way. I think I gave them the earrings. I definitely showed them. I think I also sort of left them at the cottage in case there's anything they could inspect. But then we head off to Jimmy Doherty's farm. again to check in on the cows and not so neatly segue into, and that dead body you also found. So we learned a little bit more info. We did find out that she was also found with an ornate knife that was presumably silver and had blackened alongside her, which we hadn't heard before. It wasn't totally clear whether that was maybe something that the police hadn't revealed to Mary and the Reverend, or whether it was something that they had then not shared with us. But either way, that was some new information about the discovery of the body. And we also hear a little bit more about the loch that she was found by, which was apparently, according to sort of fairy tales and kind of, stories told to scare the children, is apparently where there were fairies nearby this loch. And so, yes, she was potentially literally away with the fairies when she was off on her trances and hanging around the loch. Jimmy's a little bit worried about what we tell him about Mrs. McRae, and says that he'll go and check in on her once we sort of leave. But we otherwise don't learn a whole lot of new information. His cows are fine. He, reiterates again that the police didn't really ask that many questions or anything. And that's about it, I think, really, at farm number 2. So yeah, we decided to head back to the village again proper, and check in on a couple of other things. Yeah. You're on mute.
I think the main thing that you picked up there as kind of being concerned about was the lack of mention of a knife previously, which you would think would probably be quite a major
yeah, because there were no wounds or anything, so it didn't seem to be connected with her death, but it was definitely still a notable thing, especially because it had blackened like the other things, and it was quite an ornate knife. It wasn't a sort of normal hunting knife or cutlery knife or anything like that. So yeah, something funny there.
Yeah. So Steve plays Edmund. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Jonny.
Do you want to run us through kind of heading back to the village and what occurred at that point?
Yeah, sure. So yes, I think we've covered the things about the ornate knife. There was some spirited discussion about that. I think also, I don't know whether it was at that point or earlier on, where Edmund started wondering about the sort of the blackening of all of these objects, and the advanced decomposition of the cattle, whether there was something weird happening with time, whether there was some sort of interesting effect going on there. But I guess we'll find out. So yes, we headed back towards the village, and we stopped off at the ferry on the way to Dane wanted to have a word with the captain of the ferry, just to find out whether the captain kept records of anybody who'd been arriving or leaving the island. And essentially, for the most part, no, unless the people had pre-booked, there were no real records. The upshot was that if we came back with a name, then the captain might recognize it. He hadn't seen anybody noticeable on the ferry other than the coroner, and he didn't see Netta on the Sunday as she was trying to leave the island. So we head back to the Argyle Hotel to turn over their well, probably not library is probably a bit of a strong word, but their collection of books in the the open area. And 3 of us have terrible library use rolls, absolutely abysmal library use, which is deeply upsetting. But Jemima saved the day and was able to pick out the volume that had been mentioned earlier on, and that is a book called Iona by Fiona MacLeod, I believe.
Yeah.
So we have that all ready to read, and we're all prepared to sit down for a lovely meal and some light reading when Mary Brown and the Reverend arrived back with some upsetting news, which was that they've determined which group, which occult order Netta had been a member of, and that was the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And worse than that, this particular group, they believe, worships the entity that a couple of us have previously been acquainted with, shall we say, as the ringmaster of a rather terrible circus.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah,
we are.
so I think if Sam can come on now, who plays Jemima. Hi, Sam. So Sam unfortunately was unable to be with us last week, but Jemima did save the day.
Yeah, what would you do without me? I mean,
without whose library use role the group would not have found the book that they were looking for. Whether or not the book is of any relevance is yet to be seen, but at least they have it.
I'd like to point out, I think you rolled quite high as well, just showing off just how good Jemima's library use is. You know, just got to
Yeah,
make a
it
point
was.
of that.
Yeah, I think I rolled something in the 70s, if I remember, and it's still, I can't remember exactly, but it was pretty high. Yeah, very good library use.
It was tough to find book that.
Yeah. So, yeah, as we left it, the kind of bomb had literally just been dropped by Mary and John Moore about this group that Netta was involved with. Literally, as soon as they finished saying that sentence, William and Kate both come out of the kitchen, offering drinks around, and what can we get you for dinner? We've got a couple of options this evening. We've got I mean, we've always got a stew. You know, we can always put the leftovers in for a stew. We can do some kind of we could do probably a meat and vegetables. So I can make up some gravy. We've got William. Have we got some? We'll have some fish.
I've rather lost my appetite, actually.
Oh dear.
The fish would be nice. Thank you.
Okay, a fish, yes. Some vegetables.
Yes. That all sounds very nice. Thank you.
Are you all right, Miss? Would you like a tea?
No. I'm fine, thank you. I just no, I'm fine.
I please excuse us. I think we just had some slightly shocking news. It's all well.
Oh, my apologies. Well, come on, William. We'll make ourselves scarce.
Thank you.
And they disappear off into the kitchen.
I think I look very fixedly at Eliza and probably Edmund too, because I know you two were both the ones who experienced that. Just kind of waiting for more of a reaction now they're gone, I guess.
Yes, probably. You'll notice a certain draining of colour from Edmund's face, I think.
This was the entity that we encountered before. This is awful. If they've been trying to summon him or it or whatever it is, and we don't have the book anymore. I don't know what we can do without the book.
Well, the plan obviously is to track the book down, but we're both struggling to understand why anybody would want to, well, purposefully bring that thing here. What purpose could they have? Maybe they're
human curiosity.
It seems to defy logic.
What are this thing's intentions? Goals? Anything we know?
Yes, and what do we know of this order beyond their attachment to whatever that thing is?
Yes, precisely. Who were they before they were members of this order? What were their goals beforehand? What brought them together? Why have they come together in this way? Is there some sort of connection between them? Maybe that will help give us some sort of clue as to what their intentions are and what reason they might have for summoning something like this.
John, do you want to take this one? It's been more your... Yes, of course. Well, the group specifically that Netta seems to have been a part of, is the Alpha Et Omega offshoot, which seems to be very specifically interested in occult research. How they've gone from that to finding out about this book and then somehow removing it from our safekeeping is anybody's guess at this time. As far as we are aware, the only people who were aware of its existence were those at Fingask and, well, those at Durrisdeer as well, I suppose, that saw its use. We have no reason to believe that any of those people are involved with this group. So how word of it got around, very strange. But yes, they seem to be a group interested in the occult in general, and this just seems to be a part of what they're looking at. Obviously, a lot of what they look at is nonsense, and we have no reason to believe that anything would come of the majority of their experimentations, but we are obviously aware that there's history with this book and its actual use for occult purposes.
Perhaps they're just ignorantly, blindly grasping their way around, trying to see if anything they find works. Maybe there's no real intention, but that's the best case scenario, dealing with ignorant enthusiasts. But it could be so much
How did they
worse.
get the book? Can't have just happened into their possession, surely.
They might well be being manipulated. This particular entity did seem to specialize in twisting the actions of Sir John Stewart to its own ends.
And Netta's mind was being attacked. Perhaps others too. It's highly
Perhaps
disturbing.
so.
And Mary, do we know precisely what happened when you got rid of it? You were scared it off last time. Do we know in what way it retreated or disappeared, or was it ever truly gone?
Well, with both of these occurrences, as with any other in which we're involved, we follow up afterwards as much as possible. So once we had got everybody to safety from Fingast Castle, I returned, and all of the circus was gone. And I don't mean gone like packed up and gone home, but gone like it was never there. If you've seen a site where there's been a circus, there's always signs around, flyers that have blown off something and are around, or a missed tent pole, anything. There was nothing. And John told me that he went back to Durrisdeer and it was completely empty. Not a soul.
I'm sorry, the whole village, everybody that you previously knew there was gone?
Gone.
But I thought you said they were safe.
Actually, what I think I said was that the few people that you would be concerned about are safe.
My God.
Anybody who seemed to be caught up in whatever the strangeness was that was going on were gone.
How have we not heard about this? How have we not read about this? The whole empty village.
Well, I certainly know that a lot of these sorts of stories, they just don't get published. Everybody thinks you're mad. And clearly not. But
Or
who
is
would
there
believe it?
something-
If you read something like that in the papers, would you believe it?
Or is there something different here? Is it that the village was never really there as it was when we went there? It seems like a link we're finding here a lot is time. You remember, Dane, when we were at Durasdeer, time seemed wrong, broken somehow, didn't it?
Yeah.
Perhaps what we saw there was not what was going on at the time there. I don't know what.
We seemed caught in some kind of an anomaly. We were seeing things, hearing things that didn't fit the time.
Mary, you haven't heard of anything. Did anyone go to the village? Did anyone discover that it was there when it shouldn't have been, or did it simply just not like it never existed? That you know of?
I didn't go. Look, when I went back, everything was as it had been. The houses were decked out the same, and everything was as it was when we left, apart from the fact that there were no people.
But there must be a point at which people notice that sort of thing. I mean, this is what I'm saying. Either, as Miss Smith here says, it was just covered up or ignored for some reason, or it was not noticed for a very particular reason, an otherworldly reason. I suppose which one of those it is very important to find out.
Do we have some measure of the limits of power of the Ringmaster?
The more we understand about these limits, the more we can.
Some of these things are not reported by design. We have a level of sway over certain people and organizations that sometimes benefits us in keeping the general public away from areas that may be dangerous to them until we can investigate further. There are numerous deserted villages over the UK, some of which were abandoned in medieval times, and the buildings are still there. Perhaps Durasdeer will become one such as that in the future, with some kind of folk tale about its origins.
What about this entity? I don't understand. You say we don't know why they would want to invoke it or communicate with it. They must have some inclination. They must have some idea. Do we know anything about what they think might happen?
I don't know that they would. Sir John Stewart, who summoned us all, didn't seem to really have a clue as to the true nature of this ringmaster. He thought he'd been dealing with some colleague of his, George Smith, no relation, and I seemed completely baffled when this ringmaster appeared. We were seeing this hare that was like an animal that was looking at us funny all the time, and there were tales about it in the sort of local legends, local folk stories. It seemed to sort of shift its appearance somehow. But Sir John had no idea that the ringmaster was the same man as his colleague George Smith. He thought he'd been waiting for George Smith this whole time, and the ringmaster appeared, and well, they had a little bit of an argument until he invoked the name of Mr. Smith, and he seemed very confused about the whole thing. He certainly had been led down a bit of a dance on exactly what was happening. He didn't really know the truth of the matter. It could be the same for these cultists, these followers of this group. It's impossible to know, I suppose. Oh, Mary, Reverend, Also, there was some other information that this is all sort of everything's become a bit of a muddle. There was a knife found with Netta, with the body.
What?
There was a knife, also black.
You know.
Are you sure?
That's what Jimmy Doherty said when we spoke to him. We just I think Jane here asked if there was anything unusual, and he mentioned it, along with her being, the nudity was strange, the knife was strange, even though there were no marks on the body. So I don't know if that means anything to you. It seems to have invoked a reaction.
It was tarnished.
This is what
right?
happens when you have a volunteer police force, I suppose.
I think it was tarnished, just like the others as well. So perhaps it was silver too. I don't know if we've got a clear answer on it, of course. But...
Yeah, so you said it was ornate. It wasn't a regular knife. It was some sort of.
I don't think we can take for granted anything the police may have told you at this point. When we spoke to Miss McRae, she mentioned that their investigation and their interrogation of her was lackluster, to say the least.
Miss Doherty said the same. Apparently, we questioned him rather more than the police did.
Starting to make me a little concerned. Someone dies, and I mean, even a volunteer police force should look into it, you'd think.
It's possible that they kept that information hidden deliberately. It's not unusual in an investigation, but then they seem to have closed off the investigation.
And not
Although,
trying
again,
to
maybe
ask
they
questions.
haven't.
Not trying to ask questions. It's
John and I will have a look into this tomorrow.
perhaps be cautious, even considering your position of power. It might be they are associated with something. I don't want to throw too much of a dispersion, but
Are there any other major assumptions that we're making off the back of what the police shared with us?
Have any of you seen the body? Or are we relying entirely on what the police said? Well, I suppose we've spoken to
Yes,
Jimmy.
I would very much like to see the body. I've been working towards that anyway, but now even more so. I would be tempted to use potentially improper means to gain access at this point.
sounds fair to me.
We will see what tomorrow brings with in terms of their cooperation, and work from there, I think.
Reverend, I must ask, we know all this seems to revolve in some way around that book. The book went from the terrible ordeal that these two went through at Fingask and others, of course, and then was brought to the village of Durasdir. But what we witnessed in Durasdir was certainly similar to the sort of thing we've seen in the book, but my reading of the book and all of the possession of the book, it didn't seem to directly relate to it. It seemed like what was going on in the village had been for a long time, and the village had only recently, the book, it seemed, had only recently arrived in said village, Durasdir. So I'm wondering, do you think in some way the book changed all that and influenced everything there? Or do you think it was happenstance? Or do you think the book was just meant to go there? It all seems too unlikely to me. These would be linked, so...
Well, are these the same people who said have disappeared, though?
Yes, precisely. But there was something old going on there for many hundreds of years in the past.
Was there?
Yes, that was what we discovered.
Can you really be sure of that, if it's all suddenly disappeared? Was it ever really real?
I see your point, Miss Smith.
Well,
Reverend.
Dr. Wallace, obviously I could not speak in any certainties on anything that we're discussing here, but I don't feel that this was linked in any real way to what happened at Fingask. Perhaps our use of the book in Durasdir affected what had been happening there. Perhaps if we hadn't used the book, the outcome would have still been the same. It was still a group of people almost outside of the thrall of what had been happening there for generations, working against it. Obviously, we tried to use the book to protect you. again, I couldn't say for definite whether if we hadn't drawn the stuff on the doors, there would have been any difference at all. It's just an assumption that we've made. Our best guesswork and attempt at doing the right thing.
And if you hadn't have done so, of course, you would have assumed that we would have been drawn into said thrall and perhaps have disappeared should what
that was
occurred
the
still
fear.
have occurred.
Speaking of things that have been going on for quite some time, there is, of course, the reasoning that Netta had for coming here to Iona in the first place, which was to come to the lock, having heard about the stories of the fairies and things like that, dating back to however long, just part of the local history, much like the story of the hare was back at Fingask. Is there something in that, perhaps, that we need to explore further? Is there some sort of possible connection there for some strange reason? I mean, this all seems sort of very similar, and obviously news of the Ringmaster's connection is highly disturbing, but it otherwise does all seem a bit different. Until Sir John took his life, nobody died at Fingask. We didn't see any streaks of green light and no trances and knives and tarnished silver or blackened silver, whatever has happened to it. All of the details are very, very different.
Indeed.
Apart from this history, there does seem to be some sort of connection potentially with history and time.
I agree with you, Miss Smithy. All of our experiences seem to have been very different. The only linking feature, as Mr. Carter so aptly put it earlier, is time. It occurred to me when you said
this Ringmaster.
and most possibly. Though, if he had any impact on Durasdeer, I'm not sure. Oh, Mr. Carter, you put it well earlier. I think you got me thinking as well. She had no clothes. Allegedly, anyway. Sounds like that's quite likely. What happens to fabrics, organic fabrics, if enough time passes? The silver to tarnish that would be many, many years, you would assume.
It's an interesting question.
But what happens to bodies?
Of course.
Like Mrs. McRae's cows, they decompose. Why is she special?
She may not have been dead. Not to say that she shouldn't have aged, but we don't know about that, do we?
I wonder whether her proximity has caused these effects.
And besides, it's not like there's any rules to how this time seems to play out as far as we can perceive it. Perhaps the time did not affect her, but the things that were on her for some reason, and the cows again is I don't know why they would be impacted on this. I must admit, I would like to visit with the vet and be around for the autopsy of those cows actually tomorrow if they're here.
We have to see the body. We have to understand the cows. I never thought I'd say something like that, but there we have it. And I think we ought to see the loch. There's I suppose there's all sorts of other details as well about the Golden Dawn down in London, but I suppose we're rather more distanced from that, and there's a lot of immediate things to explore here as well. And I suppose we should read this book and see.
Precisely. And all sorts of things that Netta said. I mean, the rudderless boat in the sky. I mean, what are we to make of that?
I can only think it's connected to that green streak we saw in the sky, but I mean, that was just a flash of light, really.
And all that we've heard, it seems very much like she knew what was going to happen, didn't she? She was trying to escape, and then she felt resigned to it. She clearly knew
she was scared.
What was occurring. And she knew there was no hope after a point, didn't she? So she gave in.
Yes.
I do wonder whether she was trying to summon, whether she came here to try to summon this entity, or whether she was looking for something else. Why would she be attacked? Why would she be scared?
Perhaps she didn't like what she saw in the Golden Dawn and tried to flee, and they refused to let her.
Once we saw the true nature of the Ringmaster, yes, I can sympathise with that.
She may not have really understood what she was getting into. She may have had an interest, a hobbyist interest in the occult, mixed up in some group with some wider aims, got drawn into this whole mess, thinking she was finding fairies and magical things like that, and found something dreadful instead. She may be rather innocent.
I think that the best bet maybe for figuring out her motives, thought processes would be, well, we've got a phone number for her friend Dion Fortune. Either we can call her tomorrow, or if you would like to, I actually think I would like to follow up on a name from Fingask tomorrow that Mr. Carter and Miss Smith, you remember John Rowett, who I believe to have been the person who introduced George Smith to Sir John Stewart. We followed him for around 6 months after Fingask, and when nothing untoward happened, we basically stopped our keeping tabs on him. So I may follow that up tomorrow.
Does that seem to be where the book came from, perhaps?
It's certainly very possible that he would know about the book. It's actually Sir John referenced Mr. Rowett and Mr. Smith as being his colleagues in the whole matter. So presumably he knew just as much. George Smith seemed to be, well, the ringmaster, I suppose, of the whole thing. Seemed to be the more pressing sort of colleague, but they were referenced together at one point, certainly. I think Sir John received a phone call from him at one point to say that they were delayed. So yes, he may have been closer to George Smith. Strange.
If we can in some way decipher the progenitor of this book, that could help significantly, if it is this Mr. Rowett as you're talking about. I know from my experience of it that it's both otherworldly, but also of this world in a way, as if it's been here. Correct me if I'm wrong in this, Jonny. It's been here for a long time, but it was not made here.
Do we know where it came from? Do we know anything of the history or the provenance of this book prior to Sir John having it?
I mean, you know of it before me.
No, I'm afraid not.
Do know it holds a grasp over people, though. I experienced it myself.
So, Mary, John, you're looking into Mr. Rowett again then, and more details about the other members of the Golden Dawn group. For us then, I suppose, well, we wanted to go to see the other farm, Cameron's farm. We haven't spoken to him yet. And there's all this other news that we've just discovered, things to look into as well, I suppose. Gosh, there's a lot, isn't there? It's hard to know where to begin.
Perhaps, if you're confident to do so, Miss Smith, you did say you might like to talk to Netta's friend, if the Reverend Mary would be happy.
I was thinking a little more sneakily. I was thinking of perhaps pretending to writing letters, feigning, pretending we were Netta, or seeing if we could get some information. But I think
I don't think we should wait for the post at this point.
No.
Whether you want to tell the truth or not, we can decide. But either way, I think we need to call them, see if we can get some more information.
She's been influenced at some point by somebody, so it could well be her. Why would she change her mind? Why would she decide not to leave?
Do we know if the friend was part of this group as well?
Yes.
So we should definitely tread carefully.
Whether she still is or not, I couldn't say, but she definitely has ties to them.
To be honest, it's probably she's either currently in danger herself, or she is not our friend. given what sort of group this is, I suspect there's no middle ground.
Is there any reason to believe that they would know who we are, or that we are connected with investigating this? We've all experienced something strange. There must be other, perhaps, I can only, sorry, cats. I can only assume that many people find their way into things like this because they've experienced something strange like we did. Maybe with the cats, really sorry, guys.
Manifestation.
There's a route in that way.
The increasing pitch of Eliza's excitement and then the cat crash.
Cats are the real horrors of the universe. Sorry.
Truly.
Unless they have yet had any direct contact with this thing, I cannot imagine that they would know who you are, especially Dr. Wallace or Dane. But even I think Mr. Carter, Miss Smith, I can't imagine that that word would have got back to anybody about who you are.
Seems like there'd be no harm in adopting a change of name, perhaps.
In any case, I think it's probably safer for Jemima or Dane for one of you to perhaps infiltrate is perhaps a little strong, but try and infiltrate this group or get into Misfortune's good graces somehow, just in case Edmund or I are known to them in some way.
I think we do have a reasonable reason to be reaching out outside of anything unusual. We've been speaking to someone in the village and they say that she was distressed and then she changed her mind quite erratically. I think it's perfectly natural we might reach out to her companions.
I think that's fair. I must admit, if it's me to talk to her, I'm going to struggle to lie plain-faced and not reveal that she's dead, though. Especially to her friend. Even if she's part of this organization.
Perhaps we don't need to lie about that. Perhaps we can say, this is the reason that we're calling, but also there is this interest in the occult, and given we've stumbled across what's happened with Netta here on the island, it's only increased our interest in getting more involved.
Yes.
It's true to say she's missing. Might provoke a response.
Yeah.
And it is true that we're interested in learning more. None of that is a lie.
Anyway, I suppose we can decide when we do it tomorrow.
Meanwhile, we have this book to look over as well.
Sitting in the middle of the table this whole time. I will open the book.
Mary looks towards the kitchen and says, "You can come out, Kate." And
I feel so sorry for them.
Kate kind of shoulders the door open with a big tray, and William's following her out as well. And they put out 5 meals, and she says, "Miss, has your appetite returned?"
I'm like mouthing "be nice" to Eliza.
Spotting that. Yes, thank you. I've calmed my nerves a little, and this does smell delicious. If there is any spare, I would greatly appreciate some. Thank you. You're so kind.
She lifts like a cloth, and there's another plate of food underneath that she passes to you.
Absolute marvel.
And says, if you need anything else, we'll be in the back. But again, we'll make ourselves scarce. And she looks to William and goes,
"Thank you very much. Lovely."
Gosh, they are lovely, aren't they?
I'm sorry, Miss Smith. I just they're such lovely folks.
No, you're right. I was a bit short with her earlier. I'll tuck in.
Yeah. Lovely, tasty fish. food that's
Better
not
than
cow.
beef.
Yeah.
So are you sort of are you planning on looking through the book while you're eating?
Yeah, I was thinking Jemima was just going to kind of leaf through it while eating and not refuse to let the rest of the group read. But I'm assuming it's like a detailed reading book, so it's kind of difficult for everyone to crowd around and try and read it. Maybe I'll point out some things.
It's basically a like a fiction book. So it's a story as opposed to a tome.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a novel, or is it sort of separate stories, or?
It is. Yeah, it's a novel. Well, maybe a novella. I would say it's not full length.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to make a library use roll for Jemima, Sam? If anybody else is sort of looking through as well, then feel free.
I'm just going to get there and say you can't all do it.
Can I, rather than doing a detailed library use roll or anything like that, can maybe just have a look to see it? Like, are there pictures in this? Is it all just text? Is there?
It's all just text.
Okay.
All text.
Just look upside down while Jemima's leaping through it, and it looks like real words, right? It's not scrambly like before.
Yeah.
I was 1 point over on my check, so I spent a luck because that's just stupid.
That's the way to do it.
Okay. So it's basically a story in first person about somebody who ends up sort of conversing with these fairies and the sort of that kind of spiritual realm of the island. It also references an old prophecy that Christ would come again on Iona. There's nothing sort of particularly scary about any of it. It's not written as like a horror or anything like that. It is kind of like a fairy story, but given your current situation, obviously it takes on a kind of different light to it. But if you were just you think about Netta as a person, sort of 30 and somebody who goes around traveling reading a fairy story, it's just kind of a nice story that she would have read. And when she's into like the spiritualism, you would think, oh, I'll go visit that place that seems to have this kind of
so it's not
thing about it.
Have gone just for the niceness of the story sort of thing. Okay, I'll probably relay that it's just a fairy story and a bit of that. But I think the one thing that stands out, obviously what you pointed out, is that it talks about, I think I'll say, so it's just a fairy story, nothing particularly of interest, other than there is a mention of a prophecy of Christ returning on this island. Stands out to me, given what she was found upon. I wonder how that might relate. Certainly, it seems like there must be some relationship. Perhaps that, since it seemed like it was cut before, or a long, a time before she was found there, perhaps someone else who knew the story had made a marking there or something.
I must admit to feeling somewhat uncomfortable about religious figures, entities, manifesting.
She had a crucifix as well.
She
may have been spiritual in some fairies sort of sense, but also perhaps in a more religious way. And Mrs. McCrae certainly was a woman of faith. I don't want to get all suspicious about her, but suddenly there are connections. She didn't seem to have any understanding of any relevance of the lock or anything, though. Maybe the prophecy is completely made up by the book.
Is the Reverend still here, by the way?
Yes. Yeah. He is, yeah.
I just have a sideways glance at the Reverend when you're casting aspersions on people of faith. And as you said, I think
Reverend, is there something you've heard of before?
Only I read a similar thing since coming here. It's not something that's a major part of the Christian faith that's being kept secret, as far as I'm aware. It seems to be a local tale. I put no stock in it myself.
But the people here perhaps do.
Perhaps so. I've not yet attended a service here. It may be that they all believe that that Christ will reappear specifically on this island with 80 inhabitants. Now, I myself find that quite difficult to believe.
I'm trying to figure out whether Jemima knows something that I kind of know, and I think looking at the stats, I think she does because she's got a little bit of history. I think Jemima's going to go very old history. So I don't know if it was this island, but some of the western islands of Scotland here, some very early Christian sites. Is that true? Is that perhaps something associated with this island specifically? This could be to do with the ancient histories. I don't know if that's here though. Do you know, Reverend?
I'm not sure. I'll look into that if I get a chance. I agree with you that there are some islands that had some very early Christian settlements, but yes, I'm not sure whether Iona specifically is one.
Seems like it could be relevant, certainly, if there's something to do with theism here.
Yes.
Is this book widely published? Is it? Do you think she'd have easily happened upon this, or is this something that only the locals have?
No. This isn't just a local book. No. I would have thought that anywhere, sort of in England, she could have probably picked it up relatively easily. Would have probably been a bit of a coincidence for her to find it. It's no Shakespeare, but I'd imagine it's relatively widely available.
I'm just wondering if she needed a reason to tell people why she was here. That sounded more reasonable than what she was doing. The only reason I say that is because someone who was driven here by interest in this novel, why were they then spending days walking around in trances?
Trying to speak to the fairies, of course. If anything, I think I can't imagine what else she'd be trying to do here. That all sounds very nefarious, but pointless. Like why and who would be interested in that? And why not just be a tourist? Sorry, Jemima, what exactly did it say about Christ returning? Was it? Do the people believe that Christ was here before on Iona, or that he's just coming back in general and this is the new spot? Or do they believe he was here and he's reappearing here specifically because this is where he was before? Sorry, I really don't understand this stuff properly.
Jonny, which one was it? Returning to Iona the second time, or?
It's the I can't remember which is the former and latter. It's not that he's been here before. It's that this is where he would come back.
Okay. Jemima will relay that then and say, yes, so the return of Christ is destined to be here, not that it is his resting place or anything like that, or somewhere he has been.
Also, just worth noting, there may be more you could get from this book if you spent more time on it. Just as you've flicked through it and kind of picked out some main points. Yeah. You may be able to get more from it if you spent more time on it later.
I'm distracted by delicious fish, of course.
Yeah.
Well, if there's funny things going on with history in the past, perhaps there are funny things going on with time in the other direction as well. If Christ is meant to return here and there's suddenly a crucifix on a mound by the loch, then maybe that's not from the past. Maybe things have been fast forwarded, which might explain the accelerated decomposition of the cows and the tarnishing of the silver and things like that. That's not going backwards, that's going forwards.
So you're suggesting that Christ has already risen here?
Well, I'm not sure that I would call it Christ. If it's connected to this ringmaster, is perhaps a very, very awful confusion over who they're referring to.
Dana's kind of brow a little bit furrowed at this point, saying, I guess, kind of picks up the book, has a look at it, and says, "This is clearly fiction. Are we not? Are we not too concerned about this? Perhaps it's a red herring. Perhaps she just thought it was. It sounds like it's up her street."
No. Before, when we were in Fingask, there was a folktale about a funny hare that was cursing people or something, and that turned out to effectively be true. It was maybe not quite said in the right way, but there was a hare that was really the ringmaster, and it worked its way into folktales. The folktale was essentially true.
I suspect, having thought about it for some time afterwards, I suspect that the ringmaster knew about the folktale and delighted in teasing us with it. It might be that it was that way round.
Precisely. I think Mr. Carter has a good point there. It could be the other way around. We don't have to assume that the folktales came from the realities. It might be the realities came from the tales.
But in terms of...
How does that explain Durasdeer then? If that's... I mean, it absolutely could be as you say, Edmund, and you are far more intelligent than I am. I would probably trust your instinct on these sorts of things over mine, but Durasdeer seemed to be something... It's possible that he inserted these people in this history, and they've now disappeared now that he disappeared. Or perhaps not. Perhaps I've got all that backwards as well. Oh gosh, I don't know.
Well, it's so hard for us to fathom. My concern is if there is an element of truth in this story, and Netta was searching the island to find, I'll describe them as perhaps points of weakness or doors to contact this so-called spiritual realm. Whether somewhere on this island could act as some sort of gateway, as an entrance point, a point of contact. I don't know what form that might be, but we should study this prophecy and see.
Yes, it might, but as you say, it might be that he's appropriated the stories, or the stories may have come from unusual sightings in the past. That complete nonsense and fiction has been created out of it, but it's rooted in something real, as you say, something that is weaker, some weaker point in this whole cosmos or something. And Dane, even if this is absolute fiction, and the ringmaster has inserted himself into these existing folktales, if that is true, then there may still be some good reason to give this a thorough reading through, because it still might it might shed some light on the situation. It might give us some clue as to what sort of nonsense the ringmaster might throw at us.
I will defer to your expertise on this one.
Definitely no expertise, I'm afraid.
Yes. All Eliza and I know that is that this ringmaster does like to play tricks, so we have to be wary.
Well, I suppose we're just theorizing round in circles now at this point. We need to do something about all of this. We need to find actual answers rather than just supposing this and that and the other.
I think we need to find that knife. That knife seems to be of potential significance. If it is ritualistic, Mary, the Reverend, perhaps you might know when you see it. You might know more. It was apparently carved in there was some sort of carving or symbol on it. So perhaps that might lead us further.
Yes, I'd be interested to know if that was connected to the book, or if we give this a more thorough read, this fairy tale, whether there's any reference to a knife in there. But I'd certainly be interested to understand where that's come from, if that's something that she likely brought with her to achieve something, and if so,
or
what?
whether there's another party.
Or whether there's another party. And I would like to see the site again.
We will definitely go look. I would like to meet the vet as well, but we'll see about that tomorrow.
Perhaps after giving this another thorough read again, there may be some clue there as to what we want to look for. Put ourselves in Netta's shoes, in a way.
Okay, so tomorrow we will try to get something from these damned volunteer police and see if we can chase up anything on John Rowett. That could, between the two of those things, that could take the majority of the day for us, depending on. It may take 10 minutes to do both, or it may take a lot longer. So if you want to, well, I will trust all of you to decide what strings you want to pull. I would suggest that contacting Dion may be sensible if you're looking for motivations for Netta. And we'll continue seeing if we can follow the breadcrumbs to this book.
So perhaps we'll give Mrs. Fortune a call in the morning, have a look at the site. We still need to speak to Cameron at the other farm, and we did say we'd check back in on Mrs. McRae as well.
I will check her cows too. I'm going to check them with the ferryman tomorrow, see if they know when the vets might be coming.
Well, we've got rather a lot on tomorrow then, I suppose. And reading a bit of a bedtime story this evening as well.
I must admit, I'm rather tired myself. I was thinking of settling down fairly early.
Well, in the morning then, we shall head here for 8 for breakfast if we haven't, if you haven't come and found us beforehand, depending on when you wake. So we'll bid you good night. Aye, see you tomorrow.
Good night.
Sleep well.
They head out.
I'd quite like to have a little look at that book. I can read it aloud if anybody else is interested in reading it this evening.
I'll hand it to you and then say. So it did seem like they definitely didn't know about the knife. I wasn't really concerned they were hiding anything from us, to be honest, but...
It seemed sincere.
Those earrings, you didn't show them?
I did. They have the earrings.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Bloody forgot.
The question is whether the police have the knife or whether they missed it too. That will be interesting.
If they missed it, then who has it? Jimmy mentioned it pretty freely to us. It would, unless he is incredibly bold and somehow involved in all of this, and he took it but also told us about it, but then didn't tell the police. Well, the ringmaster has been playing tricks on us all, hasn't he? So perhaps there is some sort of mad nonsense like that at play, but it would seem a bit unusual. I can only imagine that he told the police. I suppose we can corroborate with Cameron. He found the body with Jimmy.
Yes.
Precisely. We should probably be quite careful to listen to how he describes things. That will be a very accurate way of us assessing the situation.
Yes, and having now suddenly got a bit suspicious of Jimmy, I'm a little worried about Mrs. McRae, and I'm rather keen to check in on her tomorrow as well.
Indeed. Poor woman.
Right. Well, if anybody else is staying up with me to read, wonderful. If not, I suppose probably worth getting an early night.
Jonny, this is definitely a very long shot, but I would like to go look at the library and see if there's anything at all there on, because I mean, Jemima might know a bit about this anyway, but she's looking to read more on it. Materials and how materials tarnish and break down over time. That's quite a long shot, though.
No, this is literally like the bookshelf in a pub.
Yeah.
So the fact that this book is here is basically, you know, because they're probably like, oh, here's a book that's got a story about where we live in it, as opposed to it actually being,
Just
In that
five
case,
copies
Jemima
of
is
the
sitting
Dragon
down.
Tattoo.
Yeah.
The other books are sort of like there's a dictionary, there's Tess of the D'Urbervilles, you know, it's that kind of
Works of Shakespeare,
yeah.
In that case, Jemima is going to sit down in the corner for a while, get out her notebook, and rack her brains to see if she can think of material sciences and relating them.
Well, Edmund has a certain knowledge of physics. I'm not sure it's not
that's
chemistry,
true,
but
I feel like Jemima might sit down for a while, and then after a little while, realize she hasn't come up with too much, and then think, oh, maybe I should have a conversation with Mr. Carter about it, and then come back over and be like, Mr. Carter, I've been trying to rack my brains about precisely how materials should behave over time. I mean, I think it was logical, the assessment that the organics could have totally broken down. Everything else we found is silver, correct?
I'm certainly a certain amount of the jewelry was. I'm not sure what the knife was made of. That is an interesting question.
And silver, how long would it take to go like that? Do you know? And we could do rolls on this, Jonny. I don't actually know.
Yes.
If we know.
I think silver tarnishes reasonably quickly. Gold doesn't. I know that much.
But the silver we saw was really dark, correct? It was almost black and not just a little tarnished.
Well, one of the things I was wanting to do at some point was study the items we'd found and determine whether it was just tarnish on silver or whether it was something else, whether it was corrosion. But are the earrings back at Mary Brown's secondary?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That was what Jemima's kicking herself over for not asking to have a look at them this evening.
Yes.
We did have a look at them, you know, before we handed them over. So I don't know whether you.
Yeah, but not a look like, you know, scraping them, testing them in different lit fluids and things like that.
Do you want to make a roll to see if you have the knowledge of how long it should take that stuff to tarnish?
I'd love to. This is a physics roll for me, is it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's not biology, so.
I get 39 out of 70, so that is a pass.
Cool. You think if it's left in, you know, sort of not stored properly and is in a humid condition, anywhere from 6 months to 3 years.
Okay.
So, unless she's been wandering around wearing tarnished stuff, it's happened quickly.
Interesting.
So, presumably, Edmund.
Yes.
So that's
6 months to 3 years. That's
a substantial amount of time, but certainly not as long as I was expecting for the organic materials. They would last that long, certainly, out in the outdoors. So,
indeed,
that blows that theory out of the water.
I am interested in this knife.
Very much so. It would be fantastic to find another material too, other than the silver. Then we can be certain that it's not just the silver has corroded particularly in some way, and we can age different things. An iron would be useful. A piece of iron.
Eliza, how are you getting on with that book?
Yeah, do you want to make a library use roll for Eliza?
That was a 52 out, and I needed 50, so I'm going to use a couple of luck points to make that happen.
Chipping away.
Yeah.
I think this might be my first luck points I've used so far overall. So,
cool. So there are a couple of bits that Jemima didn't pick up on that you spot that you think may be of relevance. The area around which it mentions the prophecy of Christ coming again upon Iona, it goes on to say, and of that later and obscure prophecy, which foretells, now as the bride of Christ, now as the daughter of God, now as the divine spirit embodied through mortal birth in a woman, as once through mortal birth in a man, the coming of a new presence and power.
I will relay that information and read out that passage specifically.
And the other bit that you think may be of note was a mention of basically a historian of Iona and a hope that one day they will appear. And it seems almost as if this is sort of like an embodiment of the island almost, in that it's sort of a person that would be able to tell the whole history of the island. So it's almost as if it's like a like the island's spirit kind of become embodied. That's not explicit in the text, but that's kind of the feeling that you get from reading it, is that kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I'll explain that sort of theory. It all seems a bit allegorical. I'm not really quite sure what to make of it, truthfully.
Does it give us any details about the processes involved, or anything more, or just that this may happen?
It's not a scientific text, if that's what you mean. It's not an instruction manual. It's a story.
Just wondering if any of the imagery in there might reflect what we've seen.
Does it? Yes. Does it mention the fairy mounds or the lock or?
Yes, but the bits that it mentions about that are sort of what you've already been sort of fed by other people.
Sure.
There's nothing else stand out that's sort of relevant to do with that.
Jemima will just be like, oh, looks like I missed a few important things there when I skimmed through it.
Well, I suppose we'll have to see how important they end up being, but yes, something around all of this.
Certainly, the more you think about it, the less it sounds like a typical religious text to me.
But certainly this acknowledgement of some other power, that definitely seems to be relevant with the ringmaster, or whatever to call it.
Indeed.
And the gender here is relevant, right?
Yeah, something about bride of Christ. It's possible Netta saw herself in such a way. I don't really know.
Certainly seemed like someone who saw herself as very special. She was making connections to a realm that we all can't do.
Perhaps there isn't any religious significance to the idea of a bride of Christ in some sort of way, is there? That I, as I say, I'm not familiar with these sorts of things myself. Is this made up or part of this prophecy, or is there any other religious significance to things like that? I'm familiar with the ideas of brides of Satan and old horror stories of witches and things like that. But brides of Christ, I doesn't ring any bells for me. Does that mean anything to anybody else?
It sounded like sounded to me like what you were describing was someone, a woman being the next embodiment of God or a deity, rather than being male. So rather than a bride, just another female representation, unless I've misunderstood.
Maybe the writing I'm used to is rather more facts driven than allegory and metaphor and all of this sort of nonsense.
Yes, it is somewhat hard for me to grasp.
So let's imagine we read this and we became convinced that might refer to us. She sounds like the sort of girl who might have gotten a bit carried away with something like this.
That's perhaps a question we can ask now. Then Dion Fortune. Perhaps she'll have some inkling as to Netta's state of mind and proclivities.
I would be fascinated to give her a blank slate to draw her understandings onto.
I wonder whether, Jemima, you're best speaking with her. I don't want to make any generalizations, but if she's had a female friend in Netta, she may be more willing to confide in another female friend, extending interest in all of this business. Might be a little more approachable.
Perhaps we might suggest that Netta had befriended one of us. That might be a stretch, but it might play out.
What about a cohabitant, perhaps staying with Mrs. McRae as well?
Yes.
Recently, of course, just in case they'd spoken fairly recently. Perhaps even just a day's crossover on that final day.
I mean, mentioning that tangentially that Netta had been concerned for her safety, maybe. If Dion is mindful of the same attacks of the same nature, then perhaps that will prompt her to explain things to us.
She may ask us for information if she's concerned. If we keep things loose, it would certainly give us some idea of her. Yeah, what she's concerned about as a priority.
Yes, I think you're right. If you leave the space, people do tend to fill it in their own way, and it can be really rather revealing.
I think we do just need to be cautious, as Mr. Carter mentioned. She's obviously had some engagement with somebody. Her mind was changed Sunday to Monday in quite an important way. Whether that's a friend or whether that's something more abstract, I don't know. But she's not working as an individual here, is she?
Do we know much about Miss Fortune's background? We know a little of Netta's family history. This is potentially absolutely mad, but is there any coincidence to her name being Fortune and there being a prophecy about a bride of Christ? A little on the nose?
Perhaps. I don't think Mary had been able to find much information so far, but well, you
just
can't
imagine if we ended up on the phone with the ringmaster.
I'd rather not end up in that situation.
Exactly. Sorry, I'm just suddenly suspicious of everybody now.
It is, I guess, an occupational hazard.
It's
certainly a lot for us to think about.
We need to make the leap of faith and just make the phone call tomorrow. We'll just have to see, I suppose.
Is it too late now?
Good question, Johnny. What time is it?
You're about 7 p.m. Maybe no, probably 7:30. Actually, I would say.
possibly not too late. An urgent matter like a friend going missing would be an evening call.
My concern is that if we wait for the daytime, she may be out of the house. She may be working.
Yes, that's true. Time is pressing.
Yes, you're probably right. If I do call her tonight, are we to say that we've just heard the news and we are informing her immediately, or are we going to try and hide it? You realize if we hide it, I cannot just tell her during the call, though, because the fact that I've kept that from her at all would seem immediately suspicious.
My suggestion here is that we play the concerned but not desperately close acquaintance who quite reasonably maybe hasn't been told by the authorities what has been going on.
Perhaps we were just visiting the island ourselves. We met her on our travels or something, and when we arrived at the island, we found out she died and wanted to get in touch with her friend.
I think a little. I think you were right, Jemima, about avoiding telling untruths. I think perhaps we could say, perhaps we can stretch things a little, say that we did cross over with Netta. Perhaps we also came to Iona. I say we. Perhaps you also came to Iona for an interest in its folklore and history. Found that there were, were informed by the locals there was another person, Netta. Didn't spend all that much time with her, but when she then went missing, became concerned, and unfortunately, she has passed.
My concern
You
is
realise that her friend might not have known.
How did I come across her friend's phone number, for example? That seems a little suspicious, doesn't it? Perhaps she would have carried it, but we don't know if she did.
Is it unreasonable to say, you thought? Well, perhaps it's not unreasonable to say, with the interest in the occult, you wondered who else she might have been involved with. Realised that the authorities hadn't informed any family or friends, and asked to do so on their behalf.
To be fair, we don't even know that's true, do we? We only know she hasn't been informed, I suppose. Oh, I'm awfully nervous about this.
Are you sure you're okay to do this?
I think it's a good idea that we should do it.
Of course, it could all change depending on what Misfortune says on the other end of the phone.
Just before we go, I don't know who would know this, perhaps Mr. Carter. There's no chance the recipient of the call can know where we are or where the call is from.
I'm not sure Edmund would know. Edmund's knowledge, I don't think, that stretches to telecommunication systems.
Jemima's looking even more nervous now you've said that, Dane. I don't think she'd even comprehended the concept of that.
Certainly none of you are aware that especially a normal person would have anything that would give them any inkling of where you are from you ringing them.
Are you saying they're normal? Or are you saying they're not normal?
Yes. A normal person.
If the keeper goes out of his way to describe someone as normal, that's very suspicious.
A very normal woman picks up the phone.
Very normally.
We're going off the deep end now. Starting.
Disturbingly average.
Yes. I think Jemima's kind of a little bit frozen at the suggestion, but
the first step is always the hardest, Jemima. I'm sure.
You're also mean.
I think when Misfortune answers the phone, it may give an indication as to what she does or doesn't already know, and you may have to just make it up as you go along, or reveal exactly what you want to say. I don't know that I could do any better. I don't know that any of us could really guess the exact right thing to do or to say. I don't think you can do this wrongly. I think just do what you can.
Okay. Well, hand me the number then.
So the phone is in the back. It's basically like it's kind of their personal phone, but you obviously have access to use it.
Do we have to go into their space to use it, or is that just?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
But you've kind of got the understanding from Mary and John that like you can use it basically whenever you want. So they won't think poorly of you for asking to use the phone.
Okay, asking to use. That's my point. I want to make sure they're there to ask first.
Yeah, they went into the back, so yeah,
Okay,
you would expect.
I will go knock on the door then.
This is worse than phoning Melvin's uncle.
The door pulls open and it's William, and he says, "Oh, hello.
Hello.
Do you need something?"
Yes. Might I possibly be able to use your phone? If that's not too much to ask at this time.
Yes, of course. Actually, Kate and I were just going to go out for a stroll, so perfect timing. Just give us 2 minutes to get our coats and shoes on.
It
we'll
is
be
a
out
call
of your way.
It is a call to the south of England. I hope that's okay. Yeah, you don't need a
no problem.
change for it, or
No. I believe that that our lovely member of parliament is covering any disbursements.
I'm glad. I just wanted to make sure.
He disappears off for a moment, and then he and Kate come out and smile and nod at you as they pass. And he says, "It's just through to the room to the left there." And then they disappear out.
Mm-hmm. I will head through to the room on the left then. Can I just confirm some names? So Netta, last name?
I've not even got this in my head.
Fenario.
Fenario. It's
Fenario,
not Nora Emily Fenario is her
Nora.
full name.
Yeah.
But Netta is her friendly name.
Okay, so
And Dion Fortune is the person that you're calling.
I might discuss this as a group. Do you think we would know her as Netta? Netta is what? Presumably, if we'd met her as a casual friend, she would have introduced herself as Netta.
Everybody here has referred to her as Netta.
Okay.
No
Netta
reason.
Yeah, I think apart from when Mary and John initially explained what had happened and they gave her full name, even they have then referred to her as Netta after that point.
Mm-hmm. I know you just told me her name, but I actually want to roleplay it. Jemima's like, and what's her full name? Sorry?
Flip through my little notebook. Nora Fenario.
Excellent. Nora Fenario. Just walks towards the phone. Nora Fenario, Fortune.
This is this is getting too close for comfort now.
Okay. And then she kind of hops at one foot to the other and then dials the number. Making sure that everyone else is that maybe these guys can see, but no one else is there other than these guys.
It rings. And it rings again. And it rings for a third time.
How long are these rings?
Your normal sort of phone ring.
Okay. The third one, I might already be hovering about putting it down.
Halfway through the fourth one,
it's actually leaving my ear.
Hello?
Hello. Is this Miss Fortune?
Who's calling?
This is Miss Livingston. It's about your friend. Netta is who what we knew her as.
I'm afraid I'm not really friends with Netta anymore.
But you know who I'm speaking of, correct?
Yes.
Well, I'm very sorry to inform you, but she passed away quite recently.
You hear a kind of muttering. Do you want to make a listen roll, actually?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm doing when I do this, so... Oh no, that's high. Oh, that's too high. Damn.
Okay.
Really wants to
you just hear a kind of like a breathed mutter kind of to the side of the phone. It is Dion. It's not somebody else, but it's sort of you don't quite catch what she said, and she says, "Well, I'm very sorry to hear that, especially if you're a friend of hers. But I'm not sure why it's me you've contacted, or where did you even get my name from?"
Oh, she mentioned you in passing. That was all. I thought I should let you know, as she mentioned you as a friend. Yes, it was a bit of a strange circumstance she passed away in, unfortunately. Do you know why she was traveling up here? She said she was just enjoying the scenery and such.
Are you with the police?
No, it's just a concerned friend. It was also unusual. That's all.
So you know that Netta was into spiritualism, I suppose I'd call it.
Yes, she seemed a little away with the fairies.
Well, she went there to conduct some deep healing, and I think she was going to try and study the green ray elementals.
She didn't mention that to us.
Sorry. Fairies.
Yes, she mentioned them.
But, well, before she went, to be honest with you, I cut all ties with her. She was, well, she got quite involved with some things, and she was getting quite deeply involved in things that I don't think that she understood, and I'm not sure she'd be able to control it, and I didn't really want any part of it.
Sad to hear. She seemed like such a lovely girl.
Yes, she was, but well, I think some people took advantage of her nature, and she got caught up and wouldn't listen to me, so I had to protect myself at that point.
I see. Well, I understand. Thank you for talking with me, I suppose. I appreciate it. It's been a little odd out here.
I am sorry to hear about Netta.
Yes, we were as well.
Good night, then.
Yeah, yes, you as well. Thank you again. Jemima puts down the thing quite fast. And then kind of just hops from one foot to the other, like, and calms down, and then relays. Yes, she was quite a pleasant woman, Miss Fortune. She was Welsh, sounded a similar age, I presume Jonny. Yes, she seemed like she'd cut off her association with Netta quite recently due to her own fear. In fact, apparently Netta got involved in some things that she didn't like. Obviously, I didn't get much more from her. I didn't want to press that we knew too much. Hope that was okay.
But I thought Dion was
yes,
part
as I
of the
did as
same...
well. She was certainly very guarded when she picked up the phone, extremely so. Perhaps I'm certain she wouldn't have told me everything, but perhaps either she got out earlier from that organization, or she's lying to us. But she definitely seemed to be telling the truth about that. It didn't seem like she was totally lying about that, did it, Jonny? To me, anyway. You know, when she was saying she wanted to
can
get
make-
out. Netta was deep into it.
You could make a psychology roll if you wanted. I think
Why
that's
not?
probably the most
Yeah, yeah.
sensible roll.
I won't make it, but I could make it. I could try. Nah.
No, you didn't get any impression that, like you said, she was very guarded, but you didn't get any impression that anything that she said to you was untrue.
Yeah.
There may be things that she didn't tell you, but you don't feel like anything that she did tell you was false.
That's the assumption. Yeah. So Jemima will say, I genuinely had the impression she didn't seem to want to be associated with whatever Netta was with. She thought she was in too deep. She was definitely scared, frightened of it.
What do you mean by guarded?
When I picked up the phone, she was concerned about who I was. She seemed a little awkward, frightened almost. She didn't open up. She was concerned I was with the police. I don't know whether that would have persuaded her or made her more nervous.
I thought the police hadn't reached out to her.
You heard what I said. Well, precisely. So clearly there's something more going on there. You're right.
News must have made it to her somehow.
Or Netta's been
perhaps-
involved in trouble with the police before.
I didn't get the impression she knew of Netta's death specifically. I might have been wrong, but that seemed new to her.
I wonder whether Dion's involvement with this order, whether she's been under or subject to police observation or questioning before. If that order is yes, perhaps
I mean,
that's the reason.
certainly whatever they're doing seems to be very untoward, doesn't it? And there was something else as well. The green light, something. What was it, Jonny? Sorry.
Green ray elementals.
Green ray elemental. It's a very odd thing she said. She said the fairies effectively is what.
Does
she meant by
anybody
it.
want to make an idea roll?
An idea roll.
I guess I'll make.
I was just saying, presumably we make the connection with a green flash, like thing of light, right?
That was what I was
Yeah.
going to ask you. But if you think that you would have done, then that's fine. You don't need a roll.
Okay.
Yeah,
Jemima
we were
does
chatting
not
about the
make that
green
connection.
light earlier. So yeah,
I did
But-
roll, and I got a 2, but I
Whoa, such a good idea. Go on then, Edmund. I think that's
Nice.
your idea, isn't it?
Yeah,
Go on, Steve.
Well, it's clearly green rays, green the dream. We've all.
Oh, the dream. Of course, it didn't occur to me while I was talking to her. It keeps linking
But
things, doesn't it?
so she referred to that green light as an elemental that's a fairy. So the fairies are the lights.
She said green light elemental, as if it was normal. You know, that was a thing that she would say, and then I was obviously confused about that, and she clarified it to fairies instead.
Has this terminology come up in any of your reading, Mr. Cartons, Jemima, Eliza?
No, I can't say so.
I don't believe it has. He says, looking at. No. It's a shame we don't have access to some of these Hermetic Orders texts. It sounds like to me that was a common phrase that Dion was used to using, and that perhaps yes, other texts might make reference.
Again, I could be making mad connections that don't really exist. Golden Dawn, green rays. Is there some sort of connection there? It's all to do with light and color. Possibly.
We should ask Mary. Perhaps she'll have more idea.
She might know who might use technical language like that, at the very least.
It almost sounds scientific, doesn't it?
After a
Much more
fashion.
so than fairies,
True.
rays and elements and things. That sounds very
Yes.
sciencey to me.
I agree. That thought occurred to me. Much less storybook and much more scientific, which is unusual for. But perhaps that is something to do with the Golden Dawn Association, whatever it's called.
I do detect a whiff of alchemy. I am, obviously the lines are beginning to blur somewhat, but it doesn't yet fall within my remit. But yes, perhaps there is a more structured nature to this than would otherwise be the case.
Well,
thank you, Jemima, for taking that on.
yes, well done. Very well done.
Okay, sorry, I was very nervous.
You
I
did
think
well.
we all would have been.
I did. Thank you. Yes, it was a. Oh, okay. I think I might go lie down for a while now, if that's okay.
Yes.
I have a lot to think about. I might go for a quick walk. Just to, clear the senses.
Would you like some company? It might be prudent to.
Yeah, very welcome. I think if I tried to go to sleep right now, I wouldn't have much success.
I'll join you as well. I'm not looking for much conversation, just interested in looking up to the skies.
Perhaps we can just pop down to the coast quickly and get some fresh air before bed.
Okay, so Jemima's going to bed, and the rest of them are going out for a walk.
She's not going to sleep. She can't sleep. She's just staring at the notes, but she's going to bed.
Yeah. Presumably, I've finished reading what I'm reading for the evening. I've kind of gone through it once, or is that me sort of having gone from the previous role? Was that me having sort of read half of the novella or something? Because I think I'll probably stay to read it. If I've finished reading, I'll go out, and if I haven't finished reading, I'll maybe go back.
I think you've probably gone through it, but not with a fine tooth comb, but pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll head out then with the others.
Cool. So you wander down to the coast. You actually pass Kate and William kind of wandering back up from that way as you're wandering down. It's quite a pleasant evening. The morning's mist, as there's no sign of that anymore, and it's quite a clear night. So it's quite cold. But you, as you near the coast, you hear the kind of lapping of the waves coming up onto the small bit of sand near the bay. And it's all quite pleasant. Just have a nice walk. Are you discussing anything specific while you're out? Are you planning on doing anything else, or are you just literally wandering down for a head clear and a chit chat?
I think Dane has a question. Using walks as an opportunity for him to sort of try and catch up a little bit. If that's all right, Jonny.
Yeah, of course.
I'm actually trying to think how to phrase it, but his question is basically Edmund and Eliza's take on whether the girl was the threat, or whether she was trying to. So the way he sees it is there's some kind of force. He understands that there's a force out there that is a problem that we're concerned about. Presumably the girl is either working with it or working against it. That's where his head is at. He wants to understand whether you see that your two, Eliza and Edmund, see the situation in that way. Are there two forces at work here, and we're trying to establish which force she is behind or not? That's how it's starting to formulate in his head, and he wants to kind of sense check that with you both.
I'm not sure it's necessarily as clear cut as that. I think there do certainly seem to be forces in favor of this summoning or this entity, and obviously we're working against it. But I wonder whether poor Netta's just been caught up in it all, if she was sort of innocent and manipulated by these other forces.
I guess either this is all a coincidence and she's been very unfortunate, or she's been doing something that at least one party feels is dangerous enough to intervene in this way. Or maybe it's just, you mentioned this ringmaster likes to mess around and have fun. Maybe that's it.
In our last at Fingask, we saw different worlds through the use of an object that allowed us to perceive them. This object acted as a gateway, acted as a tool to allow us access to new sites, and for I think some poor individuals as a gateway through to a different world entirely. I wonder whether Netta is the equivalent of the lens that we found, and that Netta, because of her susceptibility, her closeness, I wonder whether forces were trying to use her just as we were able to use the lens, that Netta herself wasn't an antagonist or protagonist in this, but was simply a vessel or a portal or a gateway.
So she was
just used to connect worlds.
She didn't have an agenda.
I don't know, but she seems a little too. I myself might be being naive, but she seemed too nice, too gentle to want to call this thing up.
She does seem very naive if she was even remotely understanding the powers that you all talk about. If she knew that they were involved, and she wouldn't be walking around on an island on her own, staying with people, and she was being quite public with a lot of this. So it's that naivety that has thrown me somewhat, but I guess that makes sense. Maybe she's just a tool,
a pawn, perhaps.
Yes.
She may have had an agenda that was as simple as wanting to chase fairies. She could have even been quite a simple soul. Who knows? We never really met her, but I mean, so John had more of an agenda at Fingask, and even he didn't really know what he was getting caught up in. I think we've seen so many times now, even in the real world, as it were, even without all of this strange mythological sort of happenings, people get manipulated and used by greater powers all the time. People don't fully understand what they're getting into. I mean, even Sir John originally getting involved, his gambling debt caught him up. People get swept up in all sorts of things.
Just as we do.
As did we, yes.
There's an element of theatre to all this that sounds like that rings quite true with your previous experiences. Wow. Lots to ponder. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Strange. Suspicious of everybody except suddenly Netta.
Well, for tonight at least.
For tonight at least.
I think Edmund will stare up at the stars and maybe just watch out for any sort of,
anomalies.
Meteors or, yes, green rays of...
Same.
Rowboats.
No rudderless boats, and all the stars are where they're supposed to be, as far as you're aware. You'll be glad to know.
Any weird shells on the beach?
Not that you can spot, no.
Well, Jemima's not with us, so I guess perhaps she'd know.
I guess just start pottering back.
Cool. You get back in, and William and Kate, you can hear them kind of pottering around in the back, but they're not there. So if you're heading straight up, or if you wanted to sit and have a drink, kind of up to you.
I think
probably around 8:30 or 9 o'clock. It's a reasonable time for calling it a night, if that was what you wanted to do.
Well, I suspect we'll have a busy day tomorrow, so...
Yes, I think an early night.
Yeah, we'll turn in as well. Sleep well, everybody.
Did either of you want the book, some bedtime reading, or...?
I'll pass on this one, Miss Smith.
I might give it a quick glance over. I'm sure you've spotted all of the information we need, but...
I'll hand it over. Good night, Edmund. Good night, Dane.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay. Everyone goes to sleep.
I knew it.
At whatever time you go to sleep.
Gets far too excited.
Dane dreams of a lovely long hike across sandy dunes, and eventually a city appears on the horizon, which Dane heads towards, feeling more and more thirsty as he walks towards this city, as the sun beats down upon him. And he gets to the gates of this city, and a pharaoh is stood there waiting for him, who hands him a cup of water. And Dane goes to drink from this water, only to see that it has turned to blood. Jemima is in a quite extravagant ancient-looking city, and is walking through the halls, and turns a corner and sees a pharaoh who waves her along. And you turn around a couple more corners, and he shows Jemima to a large personal pond area with a number of bits of wildlife in there. And Jemima kind of kneels down to look at the different sort of creatures that are in there, different fish and newts and other such things. When a frog jumps out of the water, and then another, and another, and they all jump onto Jemima until she is essentially smothered under a pile of frogs. Edmund. The dream begins with Edmund walking along with a pharaoh with his arm already around you, and he leads you to the top of a dune, and you overlook a large desert vista, and then suddenly realize that you're alone, and you hear a crack of thunder overhead, and the heavens open, the thunderstorm of hail and fire. Eliza is stood in an ancient city streets, and people are going about their day. And then the sun disappears from the sky. And the only reason that you can differentiate the dream from nothingness is the screams of those around you. And that's it for this week.
My sleep well didn't work at all.
You jinxed it.
Depends how much Jemima likes frogs. She does quite like frogs.
I mean, how many frogs, though? Because, you know.
There's a point to which there's too many frogs, probably.
Yes.
Cool. If anybody has any questions or comments, please put them in the chat, and John has returned and can put those up on screen for us to answer or discuss.
Can we ask some comments? Like, what the hell, Jonny?
Quick promo rundown. Monday night's Call of Cthulhu. Tuesday night's Blades in the Dark. Wednesday night's Simba Room, but not this week because we're joining in with a day off Twitch strike, which you should read up about. And Saturday, the 11th of September, is our next one shot, which is going to be Dungeon World, run by Pierre. I think that's all of it. That was easier than I seem to remember it having been in the past.
Well, usually
also,
you have to spin off all of the one shot titles we've done previously, which is quite an ask.
That's true.
No.
Yeah. Also, Matt mentioned to me earlier that somebody had followed us. Judge Judy Slayer, thank you for following us. since the last stream. I think that's it. We should be back next week as normal. Also, I'm your history teacher. Thanks for the follow. Is that actually somebody's history teacher from the stream? I hope so.
We've got a lot of history going on in these sessions, so that would be quite useful.
I was going to say, it might be really helpful, follower. Thank you. Reach out to the characters, please. Thank you.
Teach us history.
Yes, please message me rather than putting it in the public chat so that I just get the information correct. That's the issue with kind of basing your things off things that actually happened and are in the past, because you have to do research and stuff. Whereas if you're running fantasy, you can just do whatever you want. Is there anything to pop up, John? Maybe not.
That was a fun session.
Absolute accent flex. Thanks, Matt.
It was a very good Welsh accent. Yeah. It's impressive to be immediately recognizably Welsh from the first few words. That's pretty good.
Can we just phone around the world to just test, like, let's call Johannesburg?
Every character going to be for a different location from now on.
Yeah. It's funny, actually. I started this session thinking that she was going to be, she was going to have a southern accent, and then I read properly and found that for like the majority of the start of her life, she was born in and lived in Wales, and then moved to Essex later.
Ooh, she's a real person.
Yeah, everyone's a real person. Not everyone. Not everyone. William and Kate aren't.
Oh.
Yeah, the ringmaster is a real person.
The truth of it all.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the end of the third arc, that would be scary. Yes, Jonny peels his face off to reveal.
Oh God!
I told you since I read that recipe out loud, the story's just been coming to me. Really weird old skin-bound recipe book that I found.
Yeah.
It's all just been writing itself.
You got to be careful of those jumble sales.
Yeah.
That phone conversation was a lot of fun. I'm actually quite glad that Eliza Chester did that, just because it was fun to roleplay. I mean, I'm already nervous for roleplay anyway, but it's fun to roleplay someone being nervous in a roleplay, doing a thing. It's really unusual. I enjoyed that. Because I was like, how much do I want to make her screw up? She's quite clever, so she's probably not going to screw up, but...
Love volunteering other people for doing awful things on stream.
Yeah, it's good. I had fun.
Some of my favorite parts of all 3 Call of Cthulhu acts have been just phone conversations. Yeah. Because it forces it to be one-on-one, and it's quite intense. Like, it's one of the few times that you get a one-on-one thing, apart from, I think, maybe when Edmund was walking with Sir John at Vingask. Those are probably the only other one-on-one bits.
Yeah, we've stuck together this time. Not sure why that is.
I was just thinking about it, Jonny. That session was nothing, and then we went to sleep for the dream. The only thing you would have prepped for that session was the dream, I imagine. We had a remarkable amount of filling time there ourselves, didn't we?
You did, yeah, but it was great. I loved it.
I'm not complaining. I'm just amazed. That's a record for us, I think.
I had prepped Netta as well.
We do like talking.
Yeah, it was basically real time.
Yeah, that was basically real time. That was actually a real time session.
It was like 2 hours of character time as well.
Yeah.
Apart from the walk at the end. Next time we'll all just go for a walk.
That ties into the next question from the chat. How do you keep so focused on the game without going out of character or down non-game tangents?
Honestly, I think that's Jonny. Jonny's doing, because it's set up so interestingly, and with our characters' backstories now for the previous stories all intermingling, we've got so much to talk about that it's just us having fun. It's not like we're trying to keep it going. We just want to know what's going on. And playing our characters is just like a thin line on top of we really just want to find out what's going on.
Totally. Like, I think it helps in a way. I think it helps when we're like, you have almost a real-time session like this, and we are just talking in character. I think sometimes when you jump around a bit more, like there's almost like lots of different scenes, like it's all these different things happening to different people and stuff like that. That can sometimes make it a bit easier to kind of come out, because you are sort of coming out of a scene and then back in and out and in and out almost. Like, whereas, it's easier when you never even leave character at any point, but even to think about other things, you know.
I'm going to say that.
Sorry, go on.
I was
Somebody-
going to say, it helps for me that my character is about as confused as I am. So.
I'm going to say that it's much easier. So the more players that do it, the more players that stay in character, the easier it is to also stay in character.
Yeah.
And yes, and kind of just stepping over that line, almost like the phone call. If you just answer somebody back in character, it kind of then starts to flow.
Yeah.
And it's much easier than, because I'm not great at it, and it's much easier for me than I ever thought it would be in this group. So yeah, it's great.
I was going to say there are moments though when like the phone call was a really good example of it, although it's probably true all throughout, where I am also like, I also feel like I am very much a spectator of the show as well. And I'm also just loving, which also works really well in character when you have investigators who want to find out what's going on. But I'm also just like personally like, yeah, I really want to know what's happening. And yeah, just and watching like Sam and Jonny do like the phone call, I was like, as a player, I was like, and like with the dream sequences and stuff, like, you know, obviously Eliza's not in character there. She can't see what's in other people's dreams, but I was like, oh my God, I'm really like so interested in this. So I guess that's kind of out of character, but it's in keeping, I guess, because there's still that whole curiosity thing.
I'm pretty sure that exact face you were making with the like watching with Rapt like is exactly how you like the other three characters are watching Jemima do that phone conversation. So
I also think the thing about not going down non-game tangents is like stream specific. I'm quite bad in a non-streaming situation, depending on who it's with. In kind of like if somebody says something in the game that makes me think of something in real life, then I won't necessarily hold it back, and I'll probably jump in the game and go, "Oh, by the way, I watched this on TV the other night." Maybe not watching stuff on TV, but like, you know, I'm more likely to do something silly probably if it wasn't on stream. But it's almost like a bit more of a performance, and you're in a different headspace, I think, with us doing this than you would be like friends around a table.
Well, we have 2 hours. There's a very definite, you know, we aim for a 2 hour slot, so we try to keep things going, I guess.
But thanks, Night Bites. That was a really good question.
It's a really good question. I guess we've also got like the private chat as well. Like, not that it gets used like a whole lot. It's just like behind the veil a bit, but like, it doesn't get used a whole lot. We're not like not paying attention and like chatting in that all the time. But if there is an occasional like, oh, actually, I want to, you know, recommendation for a TV show or something off the back of something, there's a place for that.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's everything. So thanks, everybody. And we'll hopefully catch you next week. Reminder, Blades in the Dark tomorrow. No Simba Room on Wednesday because of the day off Twitch strike. And then Saturday, September the 11th, will be the Dungeon World one-shot, which Pierre is running. Loads of fun. Hopefully catch you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.